Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of CavsHQ Happy Hour presented by Budweiser alongside Rafa Hernandez Brito. I am John Michael. Rafa, it has been an emotional last couple of weeks. Part of what has been taking place in terms of promoting change has been to encourage conversations. And that, in big part, is what we're here to do today.
It is amazing, John. Great to see you. And unfortunately, it's a sad event that has brought everybody in this world together. And here in CavsHQ Happy Hour, we always try to live happy moments. But in order to enjoy those moments, we really have to have a conversation about the difficult ones, about the changes we all need to make as a community, as a humanity. And thank God, I think, as an organization, we at the Cavaliers have great leadership. Proof of it is what we're going to have today here in this happy hour.
Yeah, and we're going to talk to a number of those leaders, starting with Cavs head coach J.B. Bickerstaff. Real happy to have Kevin Clayton. He's the Cavs VP of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. And then we'll cap it off with Cavs General Manager Koby Altman. They're going to give us their takes, Rafa, on what it's been like for them over the last couple of weeks. And as we move forward, how the Cavaliers and the NBA have been impacting change. And these three guys really have been at the forefront of promoting much of that.
Well, promoting much of that and also leading everybody, not only in the NBA, but in the world of sports. I believe, the Cavaliers were in the forefront, making a statement right off the bat because we sense that change needs to be made. And I can't wait to hear what our leaders have to say about it. And I'm happy and proud to be part of this organization.
Yeah, no question about it. The NBA, of course, also is moving forward. 22 teams have been invited to Orlando. We're going to talk to head coach J.B. Bickerstaff about that as well. And let's go right to J.B. J.B., first off, great to see you back in the office today, huh?
It's great to be here. I didn't have much time in here before they shut us down, so it's a little uncomfortable, but I'm trying to get used to it.
It shows. You need some interior decorators in there.
I could use a little help. I think they had a Rafa bobblehead somewhere I was looking for.
Yeah, that's all you need.
It's in the mail.
Okay. Yeah. Make sure you autograph it too.
Yeah.
Hey, JB, always great to talk to you. It's been a while. So many things to talk about. And let's get right to what's been on the minds of so many recently. A little over 2 weeks ago, May 25th, George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. Now, shortly thereafter, you issued a joint statement with Cavs GM Koby Altman, eloquently stressed the importance of standing together, speaking up to impact change in the area of racial equality in a sustainable way. I mean, it's been incredibly emotional. JB, can you take us through what these last few weeks have been like for you to process and then for you to take those positive steps that you have already to promote change?
I think, the first step for me was a lot of anger, right? It was a lot of frustration. It was almost, mentally exhausting because the same thing just keeps recurring, right? It's this ugly cycle of, this happens, people get upset, we try our best to impact some sort of change and then nothing happens. And then, the media cycle changes, our focus goes somewhere else, and then it happens again, and we go through the same cycle over and over and over again. So the conversation that we just were having amongst my peers was, how do we do something that can impact change so that we don't have to do this again? Are you going to eliminate bad people from the world? No. But is there a way to make sure that there's less in positions of power? Yes. Is there a way to make those people held accountable? Yes. And those are all things that we can contribute to. So to be quite honest with you, I have been extremely encouraged and, pleased with the powerful movement that's taken place right now. And the thing just seems different this time. And all the people I talk to, they feel the same way. It's a matter of seeing all these brilliant minds come together with these great ideas, and it's from people of all walks of life. I'm fortunate enough to be a part of the subcommittee with the Coaches Association, and I'm on there with, Lloyd Pierce, who's heading it up, but guys like Stan Van Gundy, Steve Kerr, Greg Popovich, Quinn Snyder, David Fizdale, and it's just, it's so powerful to see a group of people different age ranges, different coasts, different backgrounds. And I just listened to them talk and their passion. Brett Brown is on there too. Excuse me, I don't mean to forget him. But like, these dudes are unbelievable. They're so spirited and passionate about making change that I just feel so good about being a part of that group. And then the other thing that it makes me think about is if there's just 30 of us in the Coaches Association, imagine all the other people that are out there right now that are trying to do the exact same thing. And if, we can come up with a way to change, just imagine all the other people out there too. So, it's a tragic situation that brought us here, but I've been really encouraged about the outcome and people's willingness to change.
JB, the situation lends itself to a very uncomfortable conversation because it brings people together that have been either not really looking at what's wrong with this world, because we're not just talking about the US, we're talking really about everything that is going on globally. But at the same time, it's the conversation that needs to be had. And what would you tell people in this day and age of how to get that conversation going? Because we all want to make sure that George Floyd's life it was not in vain, that the prayers, the riots, and everything that went on, the protest, the peaceful protest, does not become the prayers that we put up and we give up when there's another school shooting and nothing happened. I think the situation is kind of different because the real small minority that does not see something wrong with what happened here and what's been happening, it's something that can be fixed because we are all together in this. But obviously the conversation is a difficult one. How do you start that? What do you offer to these people that maybe feel a little uncomfortable getting involved?
Before I would even say, if you are uncomfortable asking the question, do the research on the history of why we're in this spot that we're in right now. Go back and see, all the reasons why we are here. I was fortunate enough, again, to be on that group, and we had a call with Brian Stevenson. You guys maybe have seen the movie Just Mercy. He's the guy that the movie's based on. He's got the Legacy Museum in Alabama. The Legacy Museum is a story of all the lynchings that have taken place in America through the 1950s, which you think about isn't that long ago. And in that, it starts to discuss the relationship between the Black community and the police. In those communities, the police were charged with protecting all people. People were lynched because the police officers took a step back and allowed vigilante groups to come in and lynch individuals and families. My dad was born in 1943. So, it wasn't that long ago. And that's where tradition is carried down and the fears are passed on hand to hand because of those situations. So we need to make sure that we educate ourselves. And if you do that, you'll understand why, there is such frustration and exhaustion in our communities. And that will help you be able to have the conversations, with an educated mind. But the conversation can start out as a small conversation, and it ends up with just asking simple questions of, why are you upset? Why are we here? What can I do to help? And then be quiet and listen. And once you listen, you'll start to get perspective that you may have never seen or heard before. Because I genuinely believe that the majority of the people, like you said, it's a small minority of people who don't see this as wrong, right? I just think that most of the time we're so comfortable in our own skin and our own bubbles that we don't take the time, to just step outside of our bubble for a little bit. But I feel like right now, a lot of people are taking that step outside of their bubble. And the most important thing we can do as we're doing that is educate ourselves and just listen to other people.
At the same time, when we speak about the small minority that do not see anything wrong with it, unfortunately, JB, there's a big chunk of the population that have let this happen and not really done anything about it, right? You are a product of a person that I consider a trailblazer. Your father, he had to leave Rio Grande College after 2 years because of regulations. And then, thank God, he found another opportunity to go to San Diego. But the responsibility that we have, not necessarily because we're a color or because it's white or whatever, or it doesn't happen to us, but I think that's something that needs to be expressed, and for time for people to take action on this matter. In your case, your responsibility obviously to pass it on for your children, and that's the responsibility that we all have to have. And where do we start in terms of action? You mentioned the conversation and listen, but I think something needs to happen beyond the conversation. I think we all need to stand up against that kind of behavior.
Right. And I think, we all make statements. And to your point, it's time for the statements to stop and it's time for action to start. And again, the action can be anywhere that you're comfortable. The action can be a conversation, with your friends. The action can be you hear someone making a joke that's inappropriate. You can say, hey, enough, that's not funny. Those are all small steps that we can take. We're not all prepared to be in the limelight, and we're not all used to being criticized, but you can take small steps where you're comfortable that can impact change. And if enough people do that, the like-minded, the right-minded people will see huge impact at the end of it. One of the things that I think is most important, and we understand this as we're moving, the poverty gap between, our culture and white culture in America is huge. And we can't forget that. And if we go back to the beginning, if we start helping to educate our communities, if we start to help with healthcare, you put an end to a lot of the desperation that people feel, okay? They don't have to do things where police officers have to be called, and the violence between the communities and the police officers go up. So you look at, in communities that are well off, there's less involvement from the police, right? Because less of those things are happening. The less involvement, the more violence goes down. And I think it just works hand in hand. So as we're talking about the policing issue, that's not the largest issue that we're facing, right? The largest issue that we're facing is how do we help those that don't have enough, give them opportunities and chances to improve their situation. Then they don't have to feel that desperation. Now there's not the involvement with the police and things can move forward. So we can't forget that, because of this issue that's happening now, we need to make sure that, we fix the systemic issues in our society first, or hand in hand, I should say.
Piggybacking on Rafa's question and your answer, JB, I love what you said just the other day when you were talking to the media. You said, look, you're either for equality or you're against it. There is no neutral, and this is not only a problem for races being oppressed. I thought that summed it up incredibly well. As we put a bow on this, before we talk about your team and moving forward throughout the rest of the summer, you said during that same conversation, the NBA is several steps ahead of the other sports leagues in the U.S. in promoting social change, and the Cavs in particular have been at the forefront of the NBA in that area. How so?
It's not even close, to be honest with you. Starting here organizationally, as soon as it was felt that a voice needed to be heard, our organization supported Koby and I immediately. And it wasn't, it was no hesitation. But even before that, you think about all the things that the Cavs have done here in the local community. The fact that the Cavaliers have a diversity and inclusion department, and this was before this. It didn't just start now. The organization has been in the forefront and gone out of its way to make sure that, people have a chance. The fact that there is a Black general manager and a Black head coach here in Cleveland. You look at, our TV and radio crew, the diversity that's there. So it's like this organization gets it and our leadership gets it. And we should be very thankful to be a part of it because there's a lot of places that don't. So, the NBA, you look at its ability to allow players to express themselves and support them in that. They haven't had to come out and apologize to the players for not having their back and not understanding their issues and their calls. So, again, we are extremely fortunate to be in our league. We are extremely fortunate to be with the Cleveland Cavaliers and this organization because they get it. And again, it's something from the top down because you can't have these conversations that we're having if the top doesn't support you because you just wouldn't feel comfortable. And they've given us the freedom to feel comfortable because they know they're on the side of right.
Thank you, JB, for this and also for your continued effort as we continue to move forward and fight this battle. NBA-wise, right? 22 teams go to Orlando. What was your first reaction as we started to hear some of the proposals? It started to become public, and it appeared that the writing was on the wall that our season had come to an end.
It was understanding first and foremost, and then it was disappointment. We were moving in the right direction. Momentum was building, and it was feeling really, really good to be a part of the group. So we were frustrated, and I had a conversation with our guys, and my message to our guys is whatever we have to do individually this summer to make sure that we're never, ever left off the list to be invited to the parties that the NBA is throwing, we need to make sure that we do. Whether it's 22 or 16, we don't want to be standing on the outside of the club looking in. We want to be able to walk up to the front of the line and get right in. So we've been, our guys have been motivated by it, and we're looking forward to it. And, just a little bit for you guys is, we're fighting for more. We're not giving in to say, our season is, done, or we're done working with our guys. Obviously we're not going to be a part of the 22, but we need to be able to do something. And the league has been respectful of that, and is looking into that to see what we can do, because, it just would create such a disadvantage for 8 teams, if you don't get to do anything until November when training camp starts. So, again, our front office has been fighting and pushing. There's been conversations amongst the other teams. So I look forward to see, what the league allows us to do.
JB, I know you've been in the league for quite some time, even before you became a player or a coach, but is this the longest 11-game season you ever coached in your life?
It's not even close. It's not even close. Well,
but if you put it in days, you've been the Cavs head coach for 20 days. If you just count the days that we actually worked at, so
yeah, it's strange times, my man. Very strange times.
Listen, CavsHQ is always looking to help, and I think we have come up with a plan that we're willing to be part of. How about we do it like a mini summer league in Vegas for 2 weeks, the 8 teams that didn't get invited plus the 6 teams that are going to be left out, right? And then John and I can go and also practice, keep our voices and our rhythm in tune, so we can go, 1 or 2 weeks in Vegas and play some basketball every day.
If we're going to go to Vegas, we might as well go to the Bahamas or San Diego or somewhere like that.
Better bubble, right?
Yeah. If we're going to travel, let's really travel.
Let's do a bubble in the Bahamas. I like that.
Yeah. Not a bad idea.
Hey, JB, real quick, I think it's difficult for those who aren't in your position or this team's position in terms of the organizational cycle to know just how much of a competitive disadvantage it is. We had heard that at first. If you don't get to participate in mini camps or meaningful games over the next month or two, we had people that heard that at first and somewhat dismissed it. They said, these teams are just going to get a little extra time off. Could you go into a little bit more detail what you would be doing if you get to do this? Are you worried that guys might not buy in because it's not going to be counting? I mean, how would your approach be, and to what extent would there be a competitive disadvantage, particularly with this young team, should you not be allowed to have meaningful basketball over the next couple of months?
Well, let's start there and kind of put it in terms that we can all kind of understand. Imagine not being able to do your job for 8 months, whatever that is. You had to, you could not do it, and then someone asked you to show up and do your job, with it on the line against or with other people who had been doing their job over those 8 months. And you would be in an extreme disadvantage. Our business in particular, because it is a team sport and chemistry is probably the most important piece that you can have in team sport. So now you've got all those guys that are separated. They've had their own can't do it for 8 months issues. Now you bring all those guys together, and now you're trying to build chemistry between guys who are frustrated because they haven't been able to do what they're accustomed to doing for 8 months. So you can clearly see, where the disadvantage would be. Our thing is, the difference that we were feeling had everything to do with chemistry and camaraderie. And being away from each other for so long, you'll lose some of that. If you can't be in physical contact in the same gym, you'll lose that. And, that common spirit, that common goal that we were building, it needs to be nurtured so that it can flourish. So, our thought, is just be getting guys in the gym together. And if you think about this you'd have 22 teams that had, 6 to 7 extra weeks of practice together. They would have, the 8 games to build chemistry, learn execution, learn strengths and weaknesses together. The fight that you have of going through competition and building those common bonds in adverse situations. They would have all of that. And those are just the teams that didn't make the playoffs. Now the teams that make the playoffs continue to play at a high level, at the highest level, intensities and those types of things with, every possession meaningful. There's growth there too. So, it would be an extreme disadvantage for us to just be, chilling on the sidelines, watching the games on TV like everybody else, and not able to get into the gym and help young guys develop. Kevin Love is going to be fine. Larry Nance is going to be fine. Those guys are veteran players. They know who they are. They know what they have to do. They're professionals. Our young guys are still learning. They need those minutes. They need that experience so that they can turn themselves into Kevin Love and Larry Nance and Tristan and, Big Dre. So it's extremely important for our development and moving forward that we're not at that disadvantage of not getting an opportunity to be together.
Just taking off from your last answer, JB, our young guys, our core, our future, really learning how to play in the NBA. In the case of Darius Garland, who played 5 games in 11 games in college and then was off for a year, learning how to come back from an injury and play basketball as a professional. And speaking of growth, have you guys grown a lot in terms of trying to keep this core together, keep these young guys and teach them not only this is not the normal, but how do you keep them together? And so we can see a better Colin Sexton, who was waking up and putting up 20 points every day in his sophomore year. And then Darius Garland trying to build on that, and KPJ and Windler, who hasn't even stepped on an NBA court yet. How much harder is that for the teams for the guys that you mentioned, and the teams that have the pros or the veterans in their squad?
It's extremely difficult. We're doing, our job is to teach young men how to become professionals. And the way that they do that is by being around us, being on the court with one another, and then playing against other NBA players. There is no substitute for that. You could go to the rec, you could go, play overseas, you could go to wherever. There's no substitute for playing against NBA players who are high level at what they do. You just can't replicate it anywhere on the planet. So, our guys need that. And you learn so much. You learn so many small tricks and, the intricacies of the game by playing against and just playing, period. You learn referees. You learn how referees call the game. There's so much that goes into it that we need. And again, it would be a disadvantage if we can't figure out some way. But I wholeheartedly believe the league is going to do something. I genuinely do. And, they'll do their best to make sure that we are all protected, because they understand the importance, of the entirety of the league and not just those that, may be good right now.
JB, thank you so much for this. Great job. As always, I agree with you. Hopefully the league does do something so we can all get in there, see each other again. You can get your team back on the floor. Maybe we'll get Rafa over there to decorate your office or something like that at that point.
I want one of those Budweiser T-shirts too.
We can do that.
That'd be classic.
I want to let you know that right here you got 2 guys that are ready, willing, and able for when you make that phone call. Whatever we can do to help and make an impact and have some change in our society, we're ready to go.
I appreciate you. And I'm going to make that call.
No question. Thanks, JB.
Thank you, guys.
And it is great to welcome a special guest, Kevin Clayton, the VP of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement with the Cavaliers. Kevin, I got to tell you, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show. Appreciate you taking the time.
John Mark, I appreciate it, and really happy to be here.
As we get started, to provide just a little bit of background, Kevin, can you share how unique your position is in the world of sports, not just in the NBA, but in the entire world of sports?
Yeah, and John, I get asked that question because in corporate America, a chief diversity officer, a vice president of diversity is a common position to have. And I've held that position in other industries. However, when I came on board with the Cavs, now it's been over a year or so, it was interesting as I was looking for my counterparts, there's only 3 of us in all of professional sports. So there's 147 sports teams. If you think about the NHL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, as well as the NBA and soccer, 147 teams, there's only 3 dedicated functions at the VP level. So you have individuals that are actually HR, diversity, sourcing, or you may have communications, community, D&I, but as far as a dedicated C-suite or led function, there's only 3 of us.
Kevin, it's been a pleasure to work with you since you arrived at the Cavs. I think you've made a big difference, especially for the Hispanic community. We've been working on creating great events for Noche Latina. One of the things that we have learned with your department, with your work, and with Corey James is a lot of people think of diversity and inclusion as black or white. And especially nowadays, after what happened with George Floyd and the social protests, we have learned that racism and diversity includes a lot more than just black and white. So my question to you is, what we have been trying to do with the Cavs as an organization to change the culture, because when the culture winds are blowing in your direction, it's smooth sailing, right? When it's going against you, it's really difficult. How the Cavs as an organization apply that to help the community, especially nowadays?
Yeah, Rafa, you are absolutely right. And one of the things that we have done from day one is that we needed to define what diversity was and what inclusion was, because people were using those 2 terms synonymous with each other, or they would just say D&I, diversity and inclusion, like that was a thing. And it really isn't a thing, because there are 2 very different words that have 2 very different business strategies to achieve. So very quickly, when you think about diversity, that's really thinking about all the different dimensions of diversity that make up our team. So we have people of color, we have non-people of color, we have African Americans, we have Latino, we have women, we have males, we have gay, we have straight, we have mature, older, we have all these different dynamics. That's what diversity is, the collective mixture of all of that. Then when we started talking about inclusion, people began to say, well, inclusion's easy. I'm like, well, why so? It's like, well, inclusion is just making sure that we invite people to the party. It's like, no, inclusion is taking the action to make sure that as we do invite people to the party, whatever that is, if it's a meeting, if it's an opportunity for our fans to be more involved, that we create an environment where not only are they at the party, but if they want to dance, they're free to dance at the party. So with that, we define the 2, but then to your point, which is very important, and that is around the culture. And that is that what we're seeing right now from a community standpoint, that the change that we want as a Cavalier organization, as a community partner, is that there has to be culture change. And that culture change starts with, what is the vision that we want in this community? And then how do we put the systems in place to make sure that we have equity across each one of those systems to arrive at a culture of real inclusion and equity that eradicates racism?
Kevin, it's interesting. We see a lot of the energy and a lot of the focus with these protests on police brutality, on correctional reform. But in essence, doesn't this go a whole heck of a lot deeper?
Yeah, and John, that's really one of my concerns. I get questioned now around, Kevin, aren't you excited about the energy and the fact that you look across all the different places where protests are? There's protests in London. There's protests in the south part of the U.S. And in looking at that, I'm excited about that, but I'm concerned that we're going to miss what the opportunity is, because the shift is now about police brutality, defund the police, law enforcement, the correctional system. And I just got to tell you, that's one small piece of a bigger puzzle. So the common denominator that really goes through all of those systems, but if you start thinking about the education system, where there are disparities there, 40% of African-American males actually drop out of high school. When you start thinking about the healthcare system, and we can talk about COVID and the fact that 70% of the 2 million people as of last week that had died were people of color. When you think about the housing system, financial system, the common denominator where people of color are operating from a disparity perspective is racism. So for me, what I would love for us to focus on, and I know the Cavs are focusing on that, is how do we eradicate racism that permeates all of the systems that are driving our community?
You know, mentioning the common denominator, Kevin, what happens to George Floyd, I think it's the first time in my life, my young adult life, 53 years old, that I would say 99% of the population in this world sees that there's a lot wrong with it. So it's something that we need to take advantage of. But the problem is that I think there's a lot of people on that 99% that believe they're not racist, that maybe there's nothing they can do about it or they should do about it. But if you look at the playing field that you just mentioned about all the differences and all the head start that some people get to no fault of their own, what do we tell these people? How do we get them involved, at least in the conversation, and get them involved in making an impact and making a change in what's wrong with this world?
Yeah, so Rafa, the question that I get most asked now from my non-African-American friends, colleagues, is exactly what you said. Kevin, I'm not a racist, but I feel so bad. What do I do now? And here's my response. And I don't want to get into the, are you a racist, are you not a racist? Because that then takes us off of the what do I do now? Because we all have potentially racist behavior or racist tendencies. That doesn't say we're racist or not, but from what I share with my non-African American friends is, I ask them the question, are you anti-racist? That is a totally different concept than being a racist. So whereas very much how we define diversity and inclusion, racist is a state of being. That is a behavior, it's a mindset, whereas anti-racist is what am I going to do to fight against racist behavior? So what I'm sharing with people is, and that includes people of color, is we have to become anti-racist and stop the racist behavior, not necessarily identifying, am I racist, am I prejudiced, am I discriminating? That's not the discussion. It's how do we focus on being an anti-racist?
Kevin, you continue to do great work here. I think it's worth noting that you've been with the Cavaliers over a year. It's been 14 months now. In terms of your department and what you do, it has not been in response to what's taken place over the last 3 weeks. J.B. Bickerstaff recently said the NBA is at the forefront of fighting this, and the Cavaliers are the best organization I've ever been with. And we're talking about someone, Kevin, who, of course, was virtually born into the NBA in J.B. Bickerstaff, so that's certainly a feather in your cap. Kevin, what is the responsibility in your mind of a sports team to its community, and in particular the Cavaliers to the folks here in Northeast Ohio?
Yeah, so I believe that sports teams have a front row, they have a front line to making change or to help facilitating change. And the reason I say that, and I will speak about our amazing city here in Cleveland, growing up in Cleveland, I was a sports fan of the Indians, the Browns, and the Cavaliers. And all Clevelanders, for the most part, support all of those teams. So in looking at our three teams and our ability to actually help facilitate change, we have the ability to get a meeting with any politician, any business, any parishioner, any church, anybody in this community by just having the Cavaliers or the Indians or the Browns on our business card. So I use the term of being a Trojan horse. And if you think about what a Trojan horse does, it comes in and it kind of is the big kind of force that gets into the enemy's territory, if you will. And then once in, you open up the back and you have all of these fighters and warriors coming out. So what I've tried to do is to galvanize all the different agencies and kind of the justice fighters and the social justice and social racism fighters, to bring them along with us so that we are in lockstep, but we're using kind of our brand to be at the forefront. Because we have such a large influence in Cleveland, we have such a large influence with our fans, we're able to bring others to the table that normally wouldn't be able to get into the door. So that's the responsibility that we have as the Cavaliers and sports organizations have, not only in Cleveland, but also on a national basis.
And Kevin, I know I speak for John and myself and for 100% of the team members of the Cavaliers organization that we are proud to be part of this organization. You mentioned the being able to get in front of leaders. We just had a meeting where we asked questions to the mayor of Cleveland and the police commissioner of Cleveland. But where do we go from here? What is needed from us? And what is it that should be expected from us going forward in order to make sure that the death of George Floyd was not in vain, and in order to make sure that the generations coming behind us are going to have less to get rid of when it comes to that kind of behavior?
Yeah. So Rafa, I believe in systemic change, which I have mentioned. And the systemic change is that we can't just do activity. We just can't go out and do a T-shirt drive. We just can't go out and protest without having an agenda for what the protest is for. So what I'll talk about a personal basis, and then I'll talk about it from a organization standpoint. From a personal standpoint, each individual, if you think about us as having a puzzle piece, we're a puzzle piece to a bigger puzzle. The bigger puzzle could be the Cavalier organization. The bigger piece of the puzzle could be from a community standpoint. But what is it individually that we can do? And that's really searching within ourselves to understand what side of this that we're on. And are we really upset and angered and have had enough about racism? Or are we really angered just about police brutality? So asking that question is going to drive the action. So if we are really against racism and how systemically it affects everybody, then what can I do? What I can do is have conversations with my family. What I can do is have conversations with my friends. What I can do is when I see racist behavior, instead of putting my head in the sand, like a lot of people just turn the other way, I'm going to call it out. I'm going to call it out if it's with my friends of color. I'm going to call it out if it's with my white friends. So taking personal ownership is something that I can do. The other thing that I can do, and I'm speaking as a man of color, and also I would share with my white friends. If I really want to do something, my platform personally is around economic empowerment for the African American community, for the Latin community. It's how do we drive dollars into those communities so they can self-sustain themselves? And with that, do we do business with African American owned companies? Do we do business with Hispanic companies or Latin owned companies? And that is a great way to say, instead of going to maybe Burger King, you know what, I'm going to go down to this particular restaurant in which I can buy the same food. It may take me 5 or 10 minutes longer, but that's an investment that I can do in tribute to George Floyd. From a community standpoint, from a business standpoint, corporate standpoint, I would challenge corporations in Cleveland to begin to think about the same thing from a business perspective. Can we do business with more businesses of color? Can we actually, from a procurement standpoint, our supplier standpoint, can we actually increase the number of dollars that we're spending with Black-owned companies, where we're now, if it's paper we're buying or if it's IT services, can I shift some of those dollars to that community? That is what we will do to have systemic change, because to the extent that communities of color can no longer, or we can decrease being called underserved, then that allows those communities to grow within themselves. And the last thing that I will share, if you think about protests, over a period of time, there was a protest to an end. If you go back to the Montgomery bus boycott, that was led by Dr. King in an effort to actually just have the rights for people of color to ride a bus. It wasn't a 1 week protest. It wasn't a 1 month protest. It lasted over a series of months until the transportation system was hit so hard financially that they then said, you're right. we need to change our processes and policies. So as we are protesting, as we are standing up, we need to stand up with a mission, not just to say we're protesting and we're walking in the streets. And I have been in multiple protests over the past couple of weeks myself. Why are we doing this? And let's pull together an economic agenda that is going to help everybody. To the extent that the African American community can grow, we all grow. Everybody grows.
Well, I'll tell you what, Kevin, I said this to you off the air, but I'm going to say it to you on the air again. Thank you so much for all that you've done. You have been phenomenal for this organization, for this community. Continued success, continued great work, and continue to fight the good fight.
All right. Ralph and John, I'm really honored to share some words with you and some thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kev.
Thanks once again to Kevin Clayton. Straight ahead here on CavsHQ Happy Hour, it's Cavs General Manager Koby Altman. Koby, first off, thank you for coming on. I know you wanted to talk about something that's important to all of us, so let's get right to it. I basically asked J.B. Bickerstaff this exact question. I would like to get your take as well. Shortly after George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis about 3 weeks ago, you issued a joint statement on behalf of you and J.B., stressing the importance of standing together, speaking up to impact change in the area of racial equality in a sustainable way. Of course, it's been an emotional couple of weeks. Can you take us through what these last few weeks have been like for you to process and then take the positive steps that you have to promote change?
Thank you guys for having me on. It's obviously an incredibly important time in our history. We just want to keep the pressure on and to keep the dialogue going. But it comes in waves. I still get emotional thinking about the image of Mr. Floyd on the ground. And I remember talking to Coach about a day or two afterward, and we were just horrified and angered and frustrated, and just a combination of emotions that were just really, really difficult for us to process. And I think we're still all trying to process those images. I think me and JB know we needed to do something right away. And we're obviously really fortunate because we had our organization back us immediately. But, I think for us, we're a rare duo in sports where you have an African-American GM and an African-American coach. And we knew we needed to say something right away. And then from that, build off of that into the future and have it be sustained. This is a movement. This is a chance for change. I think everybody in the country is coming to grips with that image. That image is hard to shake. You can't ever shake it. And so, what do we do now with that? Because this has been going on for years. And now there's the moment for change that everyone realized after seeing those images and that 10-minute long video, that now's the time.
We all been hit, Koby, with this moment in different ways. In my case, I came to this country having to leave mine because of the Civil War, and we used to get a version of the talk that African American kids get here in the U.S. about, if you get pulled over, show your hands, don't talk back, don't carry weapons, don't do this, don't do that. And the hardest part for me was that me talking to my nephews, there was nothing I could have said to them that George Floyd did wrong from all the talk that my parents used to give us, because he wasn't doing anything other than just strolling down and having to encounter the police. But what I wanted to ask you is, has he hit you different now that you are a father, and to think about not only having to have that talk that I think steals a little bit of the childhood from a young adult, but has he hit you different and obviously made you really get to make some change and have an impact on this?
First of all, Rafi, you're absolutely right. He was compliant. Mr. Floyd was compliant. He was not resisting arrest. he couldn't have done anything different than what was he was put through. So you're absolutely right. It's appalling and it's completely unacceptable. To your question about driving around in cars, which we just almost part of like the American dream. I remember as a youth growing up, and my mom got me a car at 17. I knew sort of what neighborhoods to stay away from because I shouldn't be there. I felt that same rush of adrenaline if a police car came behind me. And it's sad that we have we actually got on a Zoom call with our players after this happened, and a few of them talked about having that same fear that I had 20 years ago. And we shouldn't all have to live in fear driving our cars or walking down our streets. I think the vast majority of policemen are honorable and do a great job. But this goes into a deeper level of systemic racism that we need to address. We need to have these conversations. We need to have the dialogue. Why should highly successful young Black men be in fear when they're behind the wheel, or in any case, or in any community? And I really do think that this is a human rights issue more than anything else, and it's about humanity, and it's about equality across the board. And I think that's what we're fighting for.
It's interesting, Koby, you touched upon it. We talked to Kevin Clayton about this. While police brutality has a certain part in this, that isn't necessarily the underlying issue in terms of the racial inequality. Being a part of the NBA, Koby, the NBA has been progressive in terms of wanting to provide a platform. You also mentioned your players. We've seen a number of your players speaking out on social media. In your mind, how has the NBA been? How have the Cavaliers been in terms of not only providing that platform, but allowing you to speak your mind and having some of those uncomfortable conversations?
Yeah, the NBA has always been leaders in this space. We have really, really intelligent people in terms of the players. They are outraged, but they're really knowledgeable. This is not just them joining the pack and saying, I want to fight for something. This is something that they've done their research on, and they're very knowledgeable about. I like that, from our standpoint as the Cavaliers organization, before this happened, we visited, the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And I saw the looks on their faces when they saw some of the images that you see in that museum years ago, decades ago. And to see that again just resonates. And they've done their research. They've had the foundation to understand and speak out on that stuff. And I think for us, we want to, as a league, keep giving not just Black people, but minorities of all kind, women, whatever, race, gender, sexuality. Like it's a human rights issue, I think, as well. And we want to keep giving people opportunities to achieve equally. And so that's our charge. And I know we have so much work to do, but I'm so proud to work for an organization that was unbridled in their backing of us. And then also we work for an organization that has incredible diversity initiatives. And that's, to me, the key is we have to keep placing really intelligent, talented minorities and diversity at the highest level, and then it trickles down. And that sort of speaks to where society needs to be. And that's what, that's our ultimate charge, is to get people in those positions. And that, to me, properly reflects society.
Well, Koby, thank you so much for joining us. This is, we appreciate you. We appreciate giving you this platform to be able to come forward and talk about some of these things. If you had a message for those in Northeast Ohio before we say goodbye, what would that be?
One, Cavs are coming back strong. We have some really exciting young talent and vets that are just upset that we couldn't finish out the season. But I would urge, everybody, no matter what race, color, creed, have a conversation. Have a conversation about what happened, and open dialogue. As hard as it is, as tough as it is, as uncomfortable as it is, that's the first step. And I tell people all the time that ask me, what can I do? I really want to do something. What can I do? And I think the first step is listen. You have to listen and internalize why people are in such pain right now, and then go from there.
Koby, thank you so much. Take care of that little family of yours.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, man.
For Koby Altman, J.B. Bickerstaff, Kevin, Clayton, thank you to our fantastic guests, Rafa. I'm John. This has been a special edition of CavsHQ Happy Hour, brought to you by Budweiser.
Get involved.
And if we ever lose our way, remember who we are today.